ELT Jam. Most of you, or some of you, will know us as a blog. For those of you who don't, we write about educational technology in English language teaching. And we've been going for 3 or 4 years now. And we also do a variety of other things as well as blogging. We do product consultancy, so working with other companies, helping them to create digital ELT products. We do training as well, training people in large organisations and also doing some training online. And we do events. The Innovate ELT conference is, the second one is happening in May, so just a month away. So we do a lot of talking about products and digital product development, and about 18 months ago, or just over, we made a decision that as well as talking about and helping other people develop ELT products, that we'd try and do it ourselves and do it in-house. And it's been quite an interesting journey. And we've got two products that we've worked on and 2 products that we've built. The first one is Flovoco, and we've been working on that for just over 18 months or so. And the other one is much newer, only about a month, and this is the one on the right-hand side. This is Ask Me English. So the lessons I'm talking about today come from work on both of those products. Just to give you a bit more information about what they are, Flovoco, some of you might be familiar with. It's a vocabulary app. It's an app to help people learn core English vocabulary. The idea pedagogically was that we wanted to focus on more than just meaning. And lots of vocabulary apps that we saw, especially flashcard apps, just focused on the meaning of vocabulary. So we wanted to do a bit more than that, and in the app there's different levels, and the different levels focus on different aspects of what it means to know a word. So sound, spelling, relationship, collocation, derived forms, etc. And then there's a final level where you can review the words that you've seen. So this was released into the App Store, and we've been working on that. At the moment it's just for Spanish speakers. The second product is much newer, and it's called Ask Me English, or the person that actually is involved in the product is AME, so Ask Me English has been abbreviated to AME. And the idea here is that it's an English-speaking friend in everybody's pocket. So we wrote a blog post about this on the ELT Jam blog, so some of you may be familiar with AME already. The hope was that we could offer sort of just-in-time language support, so anybody that had a question about English or about learning English at any point could text a number and they would get a response that would help them with that situation or help them learn something at that point. And yeah, we've been working on that recently, and at the moment it's entirely dependent upon people responding to those questions. In fact, one person responding to those questions. So it's not particularly scalable. The hope is that we can automate some of this and move to a position where we'll be able to respond to more people's questions and serve a larger number of people, because, as I said, at the moment it's only in its infancy. So they're the 2 products, and the lessons that I'm talking about have come from them. So, lesson number 1. This is comes from an idea of minimum viable product, and I'm sure lots of you are familiar with that phrase MVP, or minimum viable product. And the idea is to use as few resources, time and effort and money as you can to deliver something which tests your riskiest assumption about the product or the direction that you're going in with the product. So rather than having an idea, spending a huge amount of time working on that idea and then delivering it, you think, what's the smallest thing that you can do to test whether you're on the right track or not? And this is fairly commonly known about within product development these days. And we attempted to do this with Flovoco. So instead of building a product for iOS and Android, we built it just for iOS, and instead of focusing on all languages, we just focused on Spanish speakers. So this was our idea of how we could start small with Flovoco. But with AME, we wanted to take it sort of a step further. And we did what's sometimes called a hackathon, or known as a hackathon. And for this, you give yourself quite severe time or financial constraints, and you see if you can deliver something which has some value around a particular problem or a particular idea that you have. And so we gave ourselves, for this product idea, we gave ourselves 1 weekend, and we said, okay, we can only use ELT Jam staff, we can't hire anybody in, we can't hire developers, everything that we do has to come from our own skills. A couple of friends did come along. And we had a small pot of petty cash, which actually just ended up being used for food and drinks. But yeah, the idea was within those constraints, what could we manage to do? And we had this idea that people would want to respond to, would have questions that they wanted to ask, and would be interested in asking somebody, a friend or a teacher figure. So we asked ourselves these 3 questions. Do people want to ask questions about learning and using English? This was an assumption that we sort of had that people would want to, but we wanted to find out. If so, would they want to ask them via text? Would they trust that they could do that and that they would get good answers? And then we wanted to find out what sort of things they did ask if they were interested. And also, could we answer? Were we able to answer via that format and quickly enough that people were sort of happy with the responses? So we gave ourselves those time and resource constraints to see if we could answer these questions. And what we managed to achieve within those 48 hours was a functioning website, a released product. We did some promotion of that product, and as a result of that promotion we got some active users into the product. We'd surveyed a few of those users and got information back, and we had data about how they were being used. And so all of that happened with this idea of a small start. So rather than thinking, right, how big a budget can we get for this product, think, well, actually, how small an amount of time can we do something in? And this way of looking at it was really helpful for us with AME. And it's quite interesting to sort of think back about, would we have done Flovoco any differently? Would we have, if we had given ourselves just 48 hours with Flovoco, could we have done something different and actually started on a slightly different track with that? So that was our lesson number 1. Lesson number 2 follows on quite neatly from that, really, which is there's no point in starting something small if nobody ever gets to see it. And one of the benefits of starting small is that you can ship something and that you can learn from that. And here the phrase ship means deliver or release or get something out there into the world rather than keeping it just within your own organisation. So yeah, the earlier that you can ship something, the more that you can learn about that, and then you can feed that information back in to make sure that you're going on the right path. So from taking the AME example again, within 24 hours we had 84 people were active users, had asked us questions via just a single number that we'd put and promoted it through only 2 Facebook pages, but 84 people had got in touch with us and asked us questions. Over 1,000 messages were exchanged in that 24 hours, which is a huge number. And we had an NPS score of 62. For those who aren't familiar with NPS, it stands for Net Promoter Score. And the idea is that you ask people how likely they would be to recommend a product or a service to a friend. Anybody who answers 9 or 10 is a promoter. Anybody who answers from 0 to 6 is a detractor. And your net and 7s and 8s are neutral. And your net promoter score is your percentage of promoters minus your percentage of detractors. And it's a really good indication of how you're doing with your product or service, how likely people would be to recommend it. And it's a nice, easy way of getting that feedback as well, because it's a single question and you don't have to do a long survey. But when we realised that it was becoming unsustainable, to be honest, within this 24 hours, we had 84 users, all these questions, and just Nick Robinson here, texting frantically and asking people for help and using Google Translate and so on. And we realised that we were unable to continue with this, so we shut it down and sent a survey to all of the people who had come on board, to those 84 people, and we said, asked them a few questions about how long would they expect to wait for a response, etc., etc. And we asked this Net Promoter Score question as well. And actually, interestingly, over 50% of the people who we sent the survey to actually gave us an answer. So we had a really large amount of engagement with that. And yeah, back to the lesson, the earlier that you ship something, the more data that you can get, and then that can inform the direction that you go next time. So as a result of this data, we worked out what we wanted to do next, and that was to So the places where we had promoted it was just to Spanish-speaking people in the UK. And we thought, actually, I wonder if Spanish-speaking people in Spain answer, or Spanish-speaking countries ask different questions and think of things in a different way, or ask us different types of questions, or what have you. So as a result of getting this data, we'd already worked out what our next step was. So yeah, our lesson 2 is not only start small, but make sure that you get something out there, because the quicker you get it out there, the quicker you can learn from it, and then you can feed that into the next decision that you make about the direction to go in. So lesson 3. And again, this comes from the idea of shipping something. So the quicker that you ship something, the quicker you learn things, and then the more likely you are to make the right decision about where to go. And it's really important to look out for potential for other directions. And quite often you can get focused on a particular way that you as a group of people who are working on a product you have an idea of where you want to go, and it's really hard to change that. Especially because you put a lot of effort and time and commitment into it, personal commitment, and it can sometimes feel hard to realise that you were wrong and that actually you should go in a different direction. So, for example, with Flovoco, we started thinking that Flovoco would be a direct-to-consumer product, a B2C product, and we released it and quite quickly realised that as an organisation, ELT Jam weren't best placed to sell to consumers. We don't have a network of consumers. It was a challenging thing for us to do. But that is how we had conceptualised the product from the outset. And it was from speaking to people and talking to peers and colleagues that we realised that actually this wasn't really where the value lay in Flovoco, and it would be better for us to shift and make a B2B product, a product that we could sell to institutions or license to institutions, and then they could access their learners. So for that reason, we built out a Flovoco backend, which facilitates third parties creating packs of vocabulary, deciding which words could be in those packs, adding the content themselves, and then shipping that to a white label or their own version of Flovoco, which would be on the App Store. And this decision was made because we were open to the idea of a new direction. And we've thought about that quite a lot since, and actually tried to incorporate that into the other work that we do now. So I think it's an important thing to regularly think, are we going in the right direction? Is this the right thing to be doing? Because there might be a load of other options that would be better, but because you're so focused on the one that you've historically been focused on, it's hard to see them. So, and we're in a much better place with Flovoco as a result of being open to that change. So our advice here is, if you can incorporate regularly the idea of, is there something else that we could or should be doing, then that can help you to move along a path which is potentially more valuable. So lesson number 4, though, is never count on a deal until it's signed. And this, so the Flovoco backend here, this came as a result of some conversations that we were having with a potential client around the functionality that they would like to see if we were to license the product to them. We were really sure that this was going to go ahead. In fact, so sure that it was going to go ahead that we committed to a developer who was going to work with us for a period of time to build the features that we needed to fulfill this potential deal. And then we found out that the deal wasn't going to go ahead. So, and actually that was okay for us. We were happy with that because we'd committed to that developer. We were happy with working with them, and then we actually built out the back-end functionality that we felt was really valuable anyway. But this happened again a second time. There was another deal where we were led to believe and pretty sure that it was going to go ahead, and we changed our behaviour as a result of thinking that it was definitely going to go ahead. And then it didn't, and then you may have spent time and effort doing things which weren't really the best thing for you to be doing at the time. So our advice here is that, by all means change your behaviour if you're thinking that it could get you a deal, or you're close to getting a deal for something, for the product that you've built. But be aware that it's never in the bag until it's actually signed. And I think actually in looking back, we still probably would have done the same with the back end of Flovoco, because that was functionality which we felt was a really good thing that we had to have anyway, and the opportunity to work with that developer was a really good one. So we're happy with it, but definitely something which we're now having at the forefront of our minds a little bit more. And lesson number 5, again, sort of follows on. When we worked with that developer, we decided to work with him because he had worked with us on the original Flovoco build, and he knew his stuff, he knew us, we knew him. It was a good working relationship. So and he was in Lithuania at the time, and that's not really a problem because at ELT Jam we're used to remote working, and we all live in different places and work in different places. And in fact, we've got lots of tools to facilitate that. And actually, I'm going to hand over to you guys now. So, I'm going to show you a slide with some of the tools that we use for remote working as a team. And so with the people next to you, how many of these tools do you know? Do you know what they do or how they can facilitate you with remote working? So, there they are. I'll give you 2 minutes with your neighbour. So, some familiarity, I guess, from the conversations. We don't have enough time to really discuss it, but I'll quickly run through them. So Slack is an internal messaging tool that you can invite different people, actually from outside of your organisation, into as well, and chat in different channels. So you can have different channels set up for different aspects of a product or a project. Toggle allows you to track your time against different projects, or different aspects of a project. So how much time do you spend on your email each day, or how much time do you spend on product A versus product B, and you can track your time using Toggle. Google Docs in the top right, and Google Drive for collaborating on like Word documents and spreadsheets, and also storing files. Trello in the middle allows you to organise tasks into lists. And it's very helpful for example, a basic version would be you had a list of tasks to do, a list of tasks that you were doing, and then a list of tasks that were done, and you would try and move the tasks between the different lists. You can do a lot more with it than that, but just basically speaking, it allows you to organise your tasks. Skype, everyone's familiar with, and Basecamp it works for projects where you can where it facilitates lots of collaboration around a project. You can comment on things and write messages and add notes, and it works well if there's a project where there are multiple people and lots of discussion needs to be had around certain aspects of that project or product. And you can set to-dos and tasks in that as well. So, yes, we have lots of experience working remotely, and we've got tools in place to do that. However, working with the developer that we worked with, who was over in Lithuania, was excellent, and the remote working wasn't a problem. However, then he moved to the United States, where he had a scholarship to study there at university. And we both made a decision that we'd carry on working together, but actually his commitment, his focus was no longer on Flovoco. And that had such a huge impact on the product and the way that the product's been developed over the last 6 months, that we felt it was an important lesson for us to call out here. When their focus was split, and then we got another developer in who was also working on another product as well. So we had 2 developers, both of whom had a split focus. And it was incredibly hard for us and for them to really commit the time and effort that was necessary. So if you can hire people, it doesn't matter whether they're physically close to you, and in fact I'd say that remote working has a huge number of advantages, and one of them is hiring. You can hire people from anywhere. But if you can find people who are definitely committed to what you're doing and can make a commitment for a period of time, or if you can make a longer term commitment to them, then you'll get much more out of it in terms of the value that they deliver towards your product. So lesson number 6 is make sure that you're focused too. And this was quite interesting for us because we sort of slightly blamed the developers for it, a little bit like, oh, you know, they're struggling to commit to us and commit to our product. But actually we realised that we were less committed than we used to be to it as well. And so at ELT Jam we've become a lot busier with a lot of the other things that we do, and Flovoco has sort of taken, not a backseat, but definitely has been deprioritised. And with that, you end up code switching a lot, and this is a term that developers use for switching between different code bases and different programming languages, and the additional effort that's involved in making that switch. But then we had that as well, because Flovoco wasn't really something that one of us was focused on or spending all of our time on, and that this really started to show, and the amount of the value that we've delivered through the product over the last 6 months was definitely less than through the previous 6 months where it was a real focus for us. So the lesson here is, not only make sure that you hire people that are focused, but that you can really commit that time and effort and energy yourself. I went to a talk by founders telling their stories, and there was a founder there who was talking about their product, which is called Insane Logic. Her name is Zoe Pedder. And her advice was, and I think this was in the context of looking for venture capital money, but her advice was, just spend as much as you've got available as quickly as you can to deliver as much value as you can. There's no point in sort of eking something out and saying, oh, well, we've got a little bit of money, so instead of spending it all at once, we'll just slow it down and spend it over the next 3 or 4 months. Because actually, that money is delivers much less value when spread out like that. And if you can concentrate that resource into one short period of time and do as much as you possibly can, if that's not enough to either get you more money or get you some sales or get you the desired outcome that you're expecting to get, then maybe it's time to just move on to something else and focus new resources on something different rather than sort of eking it out a little bit. I mean, I think that's quite a bold position to hold as well. Spend as much as you can, as quickly as you can. But I think it sort of rang true a little bit. Like and if you're seeking venture capital money, then the people who would be giving it to you see you eking it out and basically just wait until you're in an even less desirable position, and you take a worse deal for yourself. So yeah, I think that advice is probably worth bearing in mind. Okay, next lesson. Don't estimate in days, and this relates to specific tasks or to products or features of a product. We got increasingly frustrated with developers estimating to us how long something would take, and it taking invariably longer, maybe twice as long. And yeah, it was frustrating, especially when the developer wasn't spending all of their time with us. So, for example, if it was only 1 day a week and instead of being a 5-day task, it was a 10-day task, then actually that was 10 weeks that we had to wait for that thing to be done. So it started to really have an impact. And so we looked around at ways that we could get over this. Is there something that we could do that would be more effective? And there's something called story points, a concept called story points. And the idea of a story in product development is a user story is something that you deliver to the product, a feature or a bug fix or something, or an improvement that you deliver to the product, and that it has some positive impact or some value is delivered to the user of that product. So that's a way of organising your tasks basically into stories. But one way of estimating the amount of effort involved in that story is not saying we think it's going to take 10 developer days or 20 developer days, but instead working out how many points you think it's going to be worth. And points takes into consideration the effort that you think will be involved, but also the level of complexity involved in that task or that story, and the number of unknowns that there are. And by incorporating those things in, you end up with a much more accurate way of estimating the effort of something. It might be that you think something will only take a day, but actually I've never done that aspect of the task and that aspect of the task before, and actually I have to talk to somebody who is generally quite slow at responding to email. So you might take those things into consideration as actually it's not just a day, it's some extra things involved in that as well. And the way that story points works is that you estimate points based on a Fibonacci scale. So you start off quite granular at the lower end of the scale, and then as you get larger scale in terms of the feature or the product or the task, or the feature or the task, the numbers get more and more spread out. Different numbers can be used for different organisations. So as an organisation, you start to get an idea of your own scale and where for example, what an 8-point task is for you as an organisation, or what a 2-point task is for you as an organisation. So we've started to do this for everything that we do at ELT Jam, not just for product features, but actually for our own tasks. And you can see here, we've even estimated the number of points for IATEFL. And we estimated it at 34. Appropriate? Yeah. So you estimate the number of points that you think it will take, but then at the end, once you've finished that task, you say how many points it consumed. And these numbers won't mean anything to anybody other than us as an organisation. But as an organisation, you start to build up an idea of what those numbers mean to you. So our 34 might be actually your 21. But you start to work out as an organisation a point system that works for you. So there are two benefits of this. Firstly, you get hopefully better at estimating the workload involved in a task or a product feature. And secondly, at the end of each week or period of time or sprint, if you're working in sprints, you can see how many points you consumed during that time. And hopefully you see the number of points go up as you get more productive. Or for example, if two of you have a holiday that week, then you'd see that the number of points that you managed to consume that week would be lower. Or if you hired somebody new, then it would be higher. This here is a plugin for Trello, which allows you to assign story points and see how many you've done. So worth looking into if you feel that estimating in days is not working out for you. Okay. And lesson number 8, it sounds a little bit of a cliche, but lesson number 8 is to have fun with it. And product development, we've learned from developing our own products in-house rather than just working on them with other people, is that it is incredibly hard work and the hours are really long, and especially with developers in different time zones, you're never not on call, basically, and it is a huge amount of work. But the things that we do where we have the most fun tend to work out the best, and a really good example of that was the hackathon that we did for Ask Me English. So getting together, just a few of us, working on something, having a nice time, working together, it made all of the sort of hard work that we'd put in generally seem more worth it. So if you can manage to have some fun with the product development that you're doing, then that's obviously a really big plus. So that was our final lesson. So thank you very much for coming. I think I've finished maybe 1 minute early, so I don't have time for just one question. But yeah, there's my contact details there. So if you did have any questions that we don't manage to answer, then feel free to email or tweet me and I shall get back to you. But thanks very much.